Hey gang, we're in Savannah, Georgia. We are right downtown in the heat of the action here. Check it out. Historic Savannah. We are here to go to a couple of cemeteries. What do you think? We're going to start out at the Colonial Park Cemetery right downtown here. We're going to talk about some amazing history. Okay, we are at Colonial Park Cemetery here, right downtown Savannah. And we're in. Look at this. Wow. Look at these vaults. It's a very small cemetery, very historic, but filled with history. American patriots from the Revolutionary War. This was the original cemetery, guys, from the 1700s, and I think it was the mid 1800s when they moved a lot of people out of here to Mount Laurel, which is another cemetery, which I will show, but I'm going to do that as a live. But look at these stones. Look at this. Of course, this place is absolutely immaculate. Well, we're walking to the grave right now. Actually, the former, not grave, the former vault where someone very, very famous was interred many, many years ago. Actually, gosh, maybe a little bit over or around 100 years ago, he was moved out of there. But we're talking about a man named Nathanael Greene, who was General George Washington's, President George, but he would be president later, of course, but General Washington's right-hand man, handling the Southern theater, the war, the Revolutionary War. So I'll tell you a little bit about Mr. Greene, General Greene, as we walk to the vault that he was formerly in. Then we're going to go to his final resting location. And there's a reason we're going to take a look at this vault, and I will explain. But let's talk about him first. Of course, he was very famous. He emerged from the war with a reputation as General George Washington's most talented and dependable officer. He's remembered for his successful command in the Southern theater of the war. And what I love about the history of Nathanael Greene, General Nathanael Greene, is he's the one who forced the British General Charles Cornwallis. Sorry, you guys in the UK for the pun, I love you, but he's the one who forced your Cornwallis to abandon the Carolinas and head up to Virginia. So Nathanael Greene lived here. He lived here in Savannah after the war, and sadly, on June 12th, 1786, he got sick, he became ill, and he died at a place called Mulberry Grove on June 19th, 1786, and he was only 43 years old. They put him in a coffin, a beautiful coffin, and it had a beautiful silver badge put on it. And they interred him in this vault right up here under this massive, massive old tree with the Spanish moss coming down. It's hard to explain how beautiful this is unless you're here. This tree is probably 500 years old, maybe older, maybe not. And here it is. So let me read to you what it says on the plaque, and let's take a look at it first. The Graham Vault. Here rested for 114 years the remains of Major General Nathanael Greene. He was born in Rhode Island August 7th, 1742, he died at Mulberry Grove, as I said, June 19th, 1786. His remains and those of his eldest son, George Washington Greene, now lie buried under the monument in Johnson Square, well, in this city, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to go there. So what happened here? What happened? Why was he moved out of here? And how did it all go? Well, by the way, the official cause of death was sunstroke, which is really interesting. Not a lot of good medical science back then. But he was laid to rest here in this tomb, this vault, which once belonged to Royal Lieutenant Governor John Graham, who fled after the Revolution. I guess this was probably prepared for him. Yeah, he I guess got out of here. And as we stand here, I can tell you that researchers opened this vault, and they went in there to look for Nathanael Greene's remains. And this is where, in this vault, where they found a coffin. And when they first looked at it, they saw this gleaming silver plate on it. And when they washed it off, dusted it off, there was the name of Nathanael Greene. Quite striking. So there was a large throng here looking on, and they carried him out of this tomb, this vault, and reburied him under the massive obelisk that we're going to take a look at, that was actually built in his honor at Johnson Square. It's just a few blocks away. But before we go, interesting little side note. Let's take a look. Let's take a 360 of this. Well, I tell you that little did anyone know that Nathanael Greene's sworn enemy was this British officer. His name was John Maitland. And John Maitland he helped the Redcoats win the Battle of Savannah here in 1779, and he was buried here. Little would anyone know, little would he know. And it turned out, as I mentioned, he shared the tomb here with Nathanael Greene for more than a century. So it was in the 1980s when they went back in here. And again, this is well after they moved Nathanael Greene out, the Major General. And they were actually looking for, there was a pathologist who lives here, and he put two and two together, I guess, from a book. And he got the city of Savannah and the authorities to say, yeah, you can go look in there. And they went in. And let's take a look at the front again, because you can see where they went in. They busted the brick, these kiln dried bricks. You can see the remnants from 1980. Now, when they went in there, they found bone fragments, and they put these bone fragments together, and they formed a full human skeleton, almost full. The skeleton was missing its right forearm and hand. And if you go back to Maitland and the history and the Spanish in the battle in the war, he lost his forearm and right hand. So they figure it's got to be him. I don't know if they put him back or where they put him, but they laid out all the skeletal remains, and this was kind of before really good DNA technology. Maybe now they're double confirming that, but it has to be him. So very interesting. And this is the kind of history we love to talk about. All right, we are going to head over from here to Johnson Square and see the final resting place of the Major General Nathanael Greene. We are in Johnson Square, guys, and this is the monument for Nathanael Greene. Major General Nathanael Greene, A big obelisk. Look at that. Well, this says born in Rhode Island. It talks about that he died in Georgia. Soldier, patriot, the friend of George Washington. How about that? The friend of George Washington. I love that. Let's take a look at the other side. It is so beautiful here, guys. This is definitely somewhere to come for the history, but also just gorgeous. A lot of nice people, and just has a really good feeling. Look at the relief, the bronze relief. Isn't that amazing? Let's take a close-up of that. There's a small plaque here, and I'll see if I can get a little zoom in on that for you. I can't read it from here and can't go in there. Okay, so there it is, everybody. And this concludes our trip to Savannah. Just kidding. You guys ever hear of a cemetery called Bonaventure? Who wants to go to Bonaventure? All right, let's go. All right, we finally made it to Bonaventure. Wow, Bonaventure Cemetery. I've been wanting to come here for a long time. So where should we start? This place is grand and massive, and I gotta tell you, I could stay here a month and not even scratch the surface. So we'll be back here, but this time I'm just gonna do 2 graves, and we'll do a little walk. And the first grave we're gonna look at is of someone that I've been obsessed with, and really less the person and more the grave. And then we'll take a look at another grave that's down there that has a famous sculpture that everybody universally loves here. So we'll have to see the statue of the little girl. So let's start with Charles F. Mills. And why is this grave so interesting? Well, there's something very, very unique about it. And before I show you and tell you about it, let's go in here. Look at these wrought iron gates. Just amazing. Look at the detailing. Let's squeeze in here. So this is the family plot, and this circular section here is near the center of the cemetery. And most of these are set up as family plots as you go through this entire cemetery. Now there's lots of mausoleums and all kinds of stuff. I see there's a tomb or something in the back. Let's look at that first. So Charles was born in 1801 and he died in 1876, April 11th, 1876. He was a pretty well-known guy here. This says Elizabeth H. Mills, widow of Charles Mills, and she died April 3rd of 1901. And there's a big, well, here's Charles. Here's his massive tomb cover right here. So it says Charles, Elizabeth, Mary A. Mills, Sarah M. Jones, Maria Mills, Charles M. Sams, and Alfred E. Mills. Very interesting. So that's the story on Charles. He was a banker here. He had moved to Charleston, South Carolina in 1817, and he was engaged in commerce there. And then he moved to Augusta, Georgia after that, where he was an officer in the Iron Steamboat Company. And then after that, he got married to a woman named Elizabeth here. We see her grave, Elizabeth H. Cope of Savannah, Georgia in 1834 here. So they came here to Savannah in 1835, and while here, Mills was a successful merchant and banker, and he served as the president of the Marine Bank of Georgia. He was the banker, I think, from 1850 until the outbreak of the Civil War, and he was a merchant here. And I found in the Wilson Library collection, and that is in Chapel Hill, that there were invoices and records showing accounts, bills of lading, which is loading and unloading of ships and materials. And all of this information kind of proves out that he was a major, well, he was the president of the Marine Bank of Georgia and the Muskogee Railroad. So it looks like his merchant activities revolved a lot around cotton. So you have to wonder, did he have slaves? I'm sure everybody in those days had slaves here. Isn't it horrible to think about? Well, that's the history. Can't rewrite history. But what's interesting about his grave, and what really made me come, is this. You see that? Looks like a little fire hydrant, right? But it's not. It's a bell. And it is made of brass, and it is surrounded in bricks, and it is quite sturdy. It is not some flimsy little bell. What's that bell for? Well, people in those days were afraid they were going to get buried alive. And this bell, well, conceivably, it has a string or a wire that goes down to what would be a coffin in those days, and in the coffin there would be a little hole in I guess there would be a pipe or like a conduit, and then if he was buried alive, he could ring this bell and alert people to come and dig him up. Oh boy. Yeah, guys, it happened a lot. This is not something made up. A lot of people were buried alive because doctors, they would pronounce them dead and they'd bury them right away. Way back then, in the early 1800s, before, they didn't have embalming. That came before, just around the Civil War. But look at this. This is beautiful. And it's the only one left. There were others, but this looks like a, look at the size of it. It's just to give you a scale. I'll put my hand here. It's pretty big. So that was what I really wanted to see here mainly. So let's take a look now. Let's take a little walk and let's see if we can find the grave, the next grave, as we say farewell to Charles Mills and his family. Let's just walk along here and look at stuff on the way, see what catches our eye. Look at this statue here. This is a large plot, looks like a collection of family plots. George A. Mercer. Now, I believe Johnny Mercer is buried here. And I don't know, let's see, I don't think this is the Johnny, I didn't come to see Johnny Mercer, but I don't think this is, you know, I'm just looking at the Mercer name here and I wonder, boy, I wonder if they're related, because I don't see his stone here. But George A. Mercer, 1841 to 1885. Pretty amazing. Look at the trees. Look at the Spanish moss hanging, drooping. Gives it that Sleepy Hollow feel, like the movie, The Sleepy Hollow. Well, there's a lot to look at. And let's take a look over here. I just kind of going where things attract the eye. This family plot looks really interesting. Palmer? Looks like Palmer. Yep. This is the Palmer family. But I thought these two stones were interesting. 1858 to 1854. How many hopes lie buried here? So Herbert W. Palmer died very young. And we have Willie Palmer, who passed in 1888, 4 years later. Another young one. Sweetie Restel bids the... Well, I can't read it. Interesting little epitaph there. But 1862 to 1888, that's post-Civil War. So, not sure what happened. Look at this view. Wow. I'll give a little zoom in. Nice and quiet here. All right, let's go across this way. And this is what I wanted to show you. This is a statue of Gracie. Pretty famous statue here of a young girl. Everybody comes to see Gracie, I understand. Gracie Watson. And I'll get a little zoom in on Gracie. Isn't that beautiful? So the story on Little Gracie, she was the daughter of a family here who, and there's a plaque, you can come and read it, but she was the daughter of hotel owners here in town. And the name of the hotel was the Pulaski House Hotel. She was very popular here because she'd have the run of the hotel. All the guests would come in, they would see her and laugh and play and admire her. She would greet all the guests, but 2 days before Easter, they took her out to get a new outfit, and unfortunately, it was right after that that she had a photograph taken of her in that outfit, which we see here in the statue, that she died of pneumonia. She was only 6 years old. So the statue here was made by a man, a local sculptor, pretty famous, named John Walls. He has done maybe 100 statues between here and I think Laurel Grove, maybe some of the other cemeteries, but mainly here. So she's become more popular in death because people come here, and of course not just to visit. Before this fence, people would rub her nose, and I guess somebody threw stones and hit her in the nose and broke the nose, and you know, the typical kind of thing. People just can't leave stuff alone. And then I guess the students would come here and they would rub her nose, and that was good luck to get good grades. But anyway, she started ruining the statue. So they repaired it, did a beautiful job. And here she is behind the fence, and I'm glad they got a fence on this thing. So it's pretty cool. All right, so this is going to wrap up Bonaventure, and we're on to the next place. We'll come back here. There's lots to do here. We're just starting. We're getting our feet wet, but I'll come back another time. But we've got to move on. All right, see you guys on the next one.